This week on Behind the Headlines, we're pleased to welcome Inge Harding-Barlow. She's a Barron Park resident, a retired toxicologist, and for the purposes of this webcast, a donkey handler, very intimate with the donkey program in Barron Park and Bol Park. And of course, last week we lost one of the donkeys. Minor 49er died at the age of 32. So we're here to talk about the donkeys, their legacy, how they got started being there, and the impact that the donkeys have had both on your life and the life of the community. So welcome, and we're very pleased to have you. Inge, let's talk a little bit about Minor 49er. What kind of donkey was he?
Minor 49er was a standard donkey, and he was born in the Mojave Desert in 1984. He was rounded up by the Bureau of Lands Management about a year later. So it was a yearling, and he was put up to auction, and a couple in Los Altos Hills bought him. And they called him 49er because they were great 49er fans. Then when they retired about 14 years later to Colorado, they wanted to find a good home for him. So Edith Smith heard about them.
This is one of your neighbors.
One of my neighbors, and a donkey handler at that stage also. And she started to make the negotiations, and Leland Smith and I went up with her to have a look at Nina, and he was sort of rather scornful of us. I'm perfectly happy here, because he didn't realize big changes were coming. And so we agreed to take him. Now, he was going to be the second donkey of the new donkeys, of the non-Bol donkeys.
This is Cornelius Bol and
Cornelius
family.
Bol, they had the Bol family had donkeys in the Barron Park area since 1934. And when Mrs. Bol died in May 1996, the Bol family had the grandson look after the donkeys. But he was going off on his own quite a bit because he was a young guy. And so the Bol family asked Leland and Edith Smith, and they promptly co-opted me across the street. We became the first donkey handlers to the last Bol donkey, which was Mickey. Mickey was a very sick donkey in October 1996 when we took over.
He was already some 30 years old, almost at that point.
He was 28, 29 in there. And we'd gone through the building of the bypass, and the workmen had fed him all sorts of undesirable treats, shall we say, and so on. And not having a healthy diet didn't help him very much. And he developed some bone problems. And the first month that Smiths and I looked after him, there were several times we thought he was dead.
Wow.
And we had to get him up with hot bran mash and so on. And he would clunk, 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 clunk across the pasture.
That was because of his joint pain?
It was because of his bone things, and it was the clank of the bones. But it sounded horrible until he
He got going.
warmed up, and the day got warmed up slightly. Because
Yeah.
remember, it's about the same season as now.
Yeah.
And so we decided the only thing that could save his life was to get a companion donkey. And that's when we got Perry, whose real name is Pericles. And why we call him Perry is because Pericles was the Athenian orator. And for the first 2 years that we had Perry, he never brayed. So how can you have an Athenian orator who can't even bray? So anyway, we had the two donkeys, Mickey and Perry, until mid-98. And at that stage, the bone disease and just general old age we realized that within, say, a couple of weeks, we were going to have to pull him down because he had great difficulty again in getting up. He had a period of time when he could get up easily, and then it was very difficult for him. And Perry was the sweetest thing with him.
Yeah.
He was like a big dog. He would rub against him and cuddle up against him and what have you. But anyway, when we knew that we would have to put Mickey down, we were looking around for a donkey, and we heard about the people in Los Altos, and I'm still looking for their name, and if anybody can give me the name, I'd be most grateful. I know the previous owners of Perry, but not of them. It's just gone out of my head, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And did Niner have any companions in Los Altos? Okay, so he was alone.
He was the only donkey. He was in the peak of his donkeyhood. And he thought he should be alpha donkey. And I'll tell you just a funny story of how we got him up into the pasture. But anyway, when we finally got him into the pasture, he thought that he could be alpha donkey, and Mickey disabused of him of that fast. Sick as he was, no way.
How do they disabuse? Do they bite? Do they?
No, they would stand in front of each other and they would swap around, and then Perry would run to Mickey as being thing. And then Nina just walked off in high dudgeon in the end. You know, I don't want anything to do with you people. But when Nina was brought in a horse truck to where the sign of Bol Park is now, the first thing is we had to wrestle him out of the truck. He didn't want to get out. And then that took about half an hour. Then we tried to get him across up towards the pasture, which is a long grassy section. And he wasn't too enamored by the whole thing. That took another half hour.
Was he just standing? Or he didn't want to move?
He was rearing up and down,
wow.
up and down. And each time he reared, we'd make him hop. So it was, I wish we had a film of it.
Yeah, it was a battle of the wills.
Then we came to the tar, which is of part of the bike path, which we had to go up in order to get to the pasture. And he just didn't want that. He just put his four legs down and thing. And so we were banging him, we were carroting him, we were yucking him, which is another favorite treat. And then he came to the bridge. We got him as far as the bridge. A wood bridge was to him just terrible. And up he rears again, down, up, and then we pushed him again.
There were three of you?
There were about six of us.
Six of you trying to handle him, yeah.
And then we got him down into the pasture, and then he met Mickey, and he wanted to crow over Mickey.
Right.
It wasn't.
How long did Mickey live?
It was about 3 weeks.
Oh, not much longer.
No, we left it as late as we could.
Yeah.
But the phobia of tarmac and bridge, we used a treat called yucca.
Is that the plant? Yeah.
That's yes. And that's how we trained him out of that section. He had another 2 bad habits. He was an escape artist. And if there was a little hole or anything else, or even the wire which was fairly low to the ground, he would crawl under
Could get under there, huh?
somehow. And then he would want to go back the same way, and of course couldn't. So
How many times did he escape while?
oh gosh, I don't know,
Oh.
at least 20 to 30 times
Wow.
plus.
And where would he go? What would he do?
He would try to get back in, or he would, as he landed up on the helicopter pad at one stage, or
Was this the VA helicopter pad?
yes,
And how did he get up there?
don't ask me. We got this frantic call. He's up on the helicopter pad. Come get him.
What was he doing? Just hanging out?
Well, he was hanging out and enjoying the grass, because at that stage he'd found a nice grassy patch. And we just sort of, the number of times we brought him back on a dog leash, it got so bad that both Leland and I used to keep a spare halter at home so that we could rush up. And because if we had to get it out of the paddock, etc.,
Sure,
it was just too much. But the number of times we used dog leashes. And then, to me, one of the loveliest times was when he got out at the gate and he went straight into the arms of a 6'4", very good-looking policeman. And the policeman, luckily, just laughed and flung his arms around Nina. And they became the best of friends.
Oh, that's
and
lovely.
whenever the policeman was on duty in the general area, he would go visit his pal. And
How did you actually deal with, I mean, you had a number of, you were a donkey handler and there were others as well? How did you
well,
get that sort of
we
set up?
started up with about 4 to 6, and then they grew. But I think the nicest time was when there were 6 of us, and we all knew each other very well indeed. But the policeman has a sidebar story. And the then manager of Palo Alto told her staff that these were the sacred donkeys of Barron Park, and police, fire, everybody else must respect them because they were the sacred donkeys of Barron Park.
You know, I think that in today's world, with a lot of attention on Silicon Valley and innovation and that kind of thing, we almost forget about these community icons who have had such an impact on so many people, whether that's kindergarten classes, elementary school kids, people just walking in the park. I did want to read some of the comments that we've received on Sue's story this week.
Yeah.
Just to, some people are sharing, you know, their reflections. This one is from Cheryl Lillienstein, who lives in Barron Park. She says, I always looked forward to seeing Niner on my walk, and I eventually considered him, quote, my boyfriend. Once he entered his mellow stage, he would bray when I approached and let me touch his face. He relaxed and hung his head on the fence and got a kind of contemplative expression. And he wouldn't let Perry near me. Then one day, I found out that he had another affectionate friend, too. There was a friendly Russian lady in the pasture giving him enthusiastic hugs and kisses, and he was clearly enjoying the attention. I will miss him a lot.
I think that is typical, and I think people forget that the donkeys were invited to a wedding reception and went, and they were in several memorial services, and then birthday parties, kids' birthday parties, always.
Yes.
A number of times we went down there.
Yeah.
And then the Barron Park school kids used to come up once a year at least, and then we would go down to the school once a year. And in those days, when the safety regulations weren't as strict, Perry would be allowed to go into the kindergarten classroom, which the kids loved, and he never knocked a stool over or anything. He would just weave his way in and out, and they just adored him, of course.
And we should say he was a miniature donkey.
He was a miniature donkey.
Yeah.
And not only that, but when the junior school kids used to come up, the kindergartners, they used to sing to the donkeys. They used to sing a little Mexican song.
Tingaleo.
And then they also wrote a little poem for the donkeys, which we have in 1999. And then we had the donkeys write back and say what they thought of the community. They said, "We never cry, we just love your attention, and we are your donkeys."
And the donkeys really are Palo Alto's donkeys, and in particular Barron Park's donkeys. So could kind of just talk a little bit about how, just sort of the impact that they've had in the community and their importance to the community?
I feel they're extremely important to the community. I would like to see more community donkey interaction. For instance, I would like to outreach to the VA. We did at one stage where the disabled vets in their wheelchairs would come down. And both the donkeys and the vets just loved it. And also, we now have a lot of people that are non-Palo Alto, which is wonderful. We've had international visitors. We've had embassy staff come from all over the world because of some of the donkey handlers in the State Department, and a donkey handler at one stage, and so on. And they would always, any of us who had international visitors used to bring them. And they would take pictures and so on. It was just, but taking part in the Barron Park life and also in Palo Alto life, I feel is very important, both for the community so that the children know how to treat big animals and not afraid of them. There is a lovely picture somewhere of a little miniature Doberman Pinscher and Nina licking each other on their noses. And you can see the huge donkey in this thing. And then with Perry, a little girl of 16 months putting her 2 fingers up Perry's nose, each nostril.
That's cute.
And he just stood there. Because not so much Nina, but Perry, he knew a little human or little animal was a little animal.
Well, now, besides their international fame, they don't quite have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame yet, though perhaps they deserve one. And you had a few stories about the donkeys and how they were introduced to Hollywood.
When they were going to make the first film of Shrek,
The animation.
animation film, they were looking for a donkey, and they went through apparently several various donkeys who just didn't fit the bill, who wouldn't do anything. Then they heard there was one in the neighborhood. Oh, at least there were 2 donkeys in the neighborhood. And so they contacted us and said, we would like to film, we would like to draw, we would like to take still pictures. Can you make the donkeys walk? Can you make them trot? Can you do all various things? And so they came out, and at that stage, they hadn't made up their mind whether they were going to use Perry or Nina. And Perry at least Nina disgraced himself, and so Perry won the role. How did Nina disgrace himself? He looked at some beautiful handmade boots of one of the people who was drawing him. And he started to lick the boots, and then he started to want to eat them. That was too much. So Perry got the role, and you will notice that they've foreshortened his legs quite a bit. But I remember Jim Bronson having to run up and down Strawberry Hill, trotting Perry for them to film him, because they used to film, and the still shots, they came twice actually. And Jim Bronson and I were the handlers on both occasions. And we would make them do all sorts of things that they wanted in order to get the expressions that they then animated into Shrek's Donkey.
Did you see the movie? And
And
did you think that
all of them.
And did you think that they had done a good job of capturing Perry?
I think they've done a good job in making. You can see if you look at the film and so on that it's definitely Perry. Now, unfortunately, they have not contributed funds for the upkeep of the donkeys. They gave us all of $75.
Really?
Yes. And they've used him, I think, in 5 films. At first, the only people who acknowledged that Perry was a real donkey were the Germans. And I found it on a German website. Now, Wikipedia states that that Shrek's donkey was modeled on Perry of the Barron Park donkeys.
So Inge, obviously this has been a labor of love for you and for the other handlers. You have some background in, you said, farm animals, and prior to becoming a donkey handler.
Yes,
correct?
well, number of things. I've been a dog lover since my older brother, who was 20 years older than I was, left his dog with us when I was a baby. When he was a RAF pilot, and so he couldn't take the dog with him. So we had the dog, and that was the beginning of a long, shall we say, love of animals. And then I was in South Africa, and the wild animals. You used to have a guide. This was before the time of the tourists and so on. You'd have a guide in the truck with you, and then you would go all over. And it was just wonderful, because I remember once there were only 2 of us. In fact, it was really funny, because it was my cousin and myself, my second cousin, who was visiting from Germany. And in the back was the guide and my little nephew. And the discussion between my little nephew and the guide was about whether I and my cousin shouldn't get married. This is going on while there are black rhinos and white rhinos and all the rest coming at us.
You were more fascinating, apparently.
My cousin and I were fascinated by the animals, while in the back seat, the guide who was supposed to be telling us about them was trying to marry me off with the help of my
With the nephew.
But I've always loved animals,
So what has it meant to you to have the donkeys in your life for these past 20-some years?
I've been a donkey handler now for 20 years, and it's meant a big part of my life. And as you can see with the Smiths, he told the French government, not that he was an eminent musician and the composer of the first program to print music, but he was a donkey handler.
That's how he introduced himself.
That's how what he told the French government when they said, "What is your profession?" Donkey handler.
So what is it about donkeys that makes them so beloved? I mean, I know that donkeys and mules are different animals, but
Yeah.
we hear the expression "stubborn mule."
Yes.
And does that apply to donkeys?
Oh, yes.
And so, what is it about their personalities that is so attractive?
Particularly the miniature donkeys. And Mickey was sort of between a miniature and a standard. He was sort of way between the two in height. They are basically extraordinarily loving. And if you take the effort to get to know them, and just as the horse whisperer blows on the noses of the horses, you blow on the noses of a donkey, and you make friends with him. That's one of the ways you make friends with him. And both donkeys have been extraordinarily loving. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't kick, or they don't nip, or anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of their life.
Yeah.
Now, you also you've told us some wonderful stories here today, and I think you also said that you were very interested in having other people tell their stories and
Yes.
maybe put that together in a book or something.
Yes,
Can you tell us a
I'd-
little bit about that?
I would love for people to send in stories, their stories. We've got quite a collection. There's some of Jim Bronson's stories and so on, but I'd love to have, and it doesn't matter whether it is the bold donkeys, like an Negrita, which was the black donkey, who used to land up in the Smith's kitchen, or any of the others. And unfortunately, only one of the donkeys is buried in Bol Park. When it was still part of the Bol Park. But I would love to make a collection of these stories.
Okay.
That I think it would make both a lovely adult and children's book, just as the dog diaries are, that my cousin's kids just love, which they are written for children, but they are also for adults.
So where can people send their remembrances, their stories, if they'd like to contribute to a book or some sort of collection? Can they send it to you?
Yes.
Okay. And what is your email address?
Our email address is ihb146@eskimo.com.
At Eskimo.com. Okay. And we'll put that on the screen as well. I want to wrap up, but we haven't talked about Perry at this point and what the future might be for him and whether or not there might be another donkey coming into the fold.
We're looking for another donkey because it's better to have a pair for the health of all donkeys, as we found out with Mickey. And Perry is 22 now.
Okay.
Now, Perry being a miniature donkey, he is a garbage pail, and we have to really look after his health.
Oh, okay.
In England, because miniature donkeys are garbage pails, the average lifespan is only about 15 years.
Wow.
He is already 22. So, no, he hasn't made the 31 of Mickey or the 32 of Minor. And there are a lot of donkeys that live to be 35 to 45. We'd hope Nina would go as far as that, but he didn't. But it's much more difficult with a miniature donkey.
Okay.
And that's why he needs a companion. It can be either a standard or a miniature. That, I think, would be wonderful for the community.
Yes, yeah, to keep the donkey tradition going. He is currently not in Bol Park, is that correct?
At
Is
the
he down
present
in,
moment, he isn't.
is
No.
he down in, someone
No,
posted about
it's
an equine facility?
There's just he is away from Bol Park, shall we say? And I should mention two other things. First of all, the official owners of the donkeys, for tax reasons as well as other things, is actera.org.
That's the nonprofit here in Palo Alto.
And then also the pasture is owned by James Witt.
Okay.
So it's a privately owned pasture.
It's a privately owned pasture.
And you've been leasing that pasture?
They lease it partially to us, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, we'll hope for the best and hope to see Perry back and with a companion as well. I just wanted to thank you for your time and to take, that you've explained the history of the donkeys and also shared with us some of the stories and the wonderful remembrances of Niner. So we really appreciate it, Inge. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
That wraps it up for this week's Behind the Headlines. If you'd like to read some of the remembrances about Niner that are posted on our website, that's paloaltoonline.com. You can search for the headline, Beloved Palo Alto Donkey Dies. And you can always tune to our YouTube page, which is youtube.com/PA Weekly as well for other media that we present. So thanks for your time, and we'll see you next week.